if I may, on the financial aspect.
Certainly.
Thank you. Yeah, we keep talking about £28,000 as if that's the total cost of the whole thing, but of course that is one of the distortions that have been put around to make it look as if this was unfair. That is not the actual figure. What you have to do is look at how much that ongoing loss will be, and if we carried that loss forward through the whole of the following year, we would sustain another loss in excess of £1 million on top of the £1 million that we're already putting in, or would have put in had this not been called in, because of course the 340,000 has not been paid out yet because it's been called in, and we haven't had the opportunity to give that money to the YMCA. So it's not a £28,000 difference. It's a whole lot more than that. And when Councillor Long talks about did we pay it from COVID funding, well, of course we didn't, because we have spent a great deal more so far than we've recovered. So we are continuing to spend to protect our people, and we will continue to do so. The 13.9 million that he talks about in balances won't last very long if all we do is to spend and have no actual recourse whatsoever to how we get that back. So what they're doing, as I said before, is they are asking us to be reckless, to say that before we know if the government are going to pay any of it back, and hopefully they will, but before we know that, we should go and make the decision to open all the pools anyway, regardless of the fact that if we do that and it carries on for any length of time, the loss will become really, really serious. It's bad enough now, but it is getting very much more serious. And when he talks about 13 point, I'm dealing with your question. It's really irritating me. Councillor Longton keeps interrupting people. Nobody interrupted you, so I'd be grateful for the courtesy if you do the same.
Sorry, I thought you'd finished, Councillor Vincent. I would just like to come back on that first point.
Yeah, well, I haven't finished, so if you don't mind, I would like to continue. The 13.9 million that he talks about in balances, as I've said, won't last very long if we keep on spending it over and over again, which of course is what historically Labour always do. What we are saying here is, as I've said before, that we dealt with the issue of which of the pools and which of the gyms should be reopened on the basis of information given to us by YMCA, their preference, what they thought was the most cost-effective option. The figures at Thornton Gym are obvious, and obviously that's why we went for it. The figures at Garstang are based upon, obviously they've all been closed for a very long time, so you're going to have to using historical data anyway. You can't say that we know exactly what it would have been over the last 6 months, because we don't. But what we do know is that this is a relatively small pool with a relatively high number of members for a small pool who are committed, it would appear from the fact that they have leaked members less than anywhere else to reusing that pool, and where schools have more schools using that pool than anywhere else. So the data that was important as far as we were concerned, and the data which YMCA clearly thought was important, was the data that we very clearly took into account. And we did it for those reasons and not for some other reasons that you would prefer to invent because you think that we didn't look at them.
Okay, Chair, can I come back?
Thank you, Councillor Vincent. Can I ask Councillor Collinson for her question?
I'm really sorry to interrupt. I am very sorry. Councillor Collinson, it might be an idea if you turn your camera off. Your sound is very echoey and very distorted. So if you just turn your camera off, it might help the sound travel a bit better. You just test that for me now. Yes, it is. Thank you. A little bit, yes.
Right. As a child, because MCA put them forward as cost effective. Most to being successful as a child, the logic was Garstang had retained the highest percentage of members, and pool of 64%, have Fleetwood 39%. Garston the highest number of school children, but nearly 50% over Fleetwood. The Cabinet wanted to test the appetite for a return to leisure centre by the public schools and the members before risking any more money. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Councillor Bowen, or do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, it's quite true what Councillor Collinson has said. We just wanted to test the water to see exactly how many people would return, and also the amount of members that have returned to Garstang Leisure Centre is by far the most, a much higher percentage than Fleetwood, apart from Thornton. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Rob Fail, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it would be helpful if, again, if it was left unmuted and we had a proper discussion rather than this a list of questions. I think we need to keep the flow of it right. So that would, the best way of doing that, in my opinion, is to ask the question, allow an answer, and then to go for a follow-up question if that need be. So I'll approach it like that. I mean, just to answer one or two of the points made so far, saying about membership, and you can move from you can use the other leisure centres, then clearly to some extent membership figures are irrelevant, because you can be, your home base may be Fleetwood, Thornton, Poulton, Garstang. It doesn't really matter because you can go to any of them. So I think there is some question marks over the membership data, but certainly with regard to the usage figures, we already knew there were problems there. There were problems with the lack of a split between gym use only and pool use only, and gym and pool use combined. And there was also this issue of when the pools were open and when they were closed. So there were already question marks about that, but I believe now from Councillor Beavers that we've got, the council has now got updated figures, so we can produce normalised and levelled figures. So whatever was presented before needs to be re-looked at, in my view, from what's being said, because what I'm hearing is that you know, once you take into account the closures, then certainly in 2020-21, that then the figures are fairly even across the centres, and potentially it sounds, in fact, after it's been normalised, that Fleetwood's gym actually gets a higher use than Garstang's. So I think we definitely those figures as a committee when we get to the deliberation stage, if that's possible. If it's not possible, then it still needs to go back to the cabinet to look at, because the premise of all this is based on some data that is statistically unsound. Okay, just getting on to my questions then. For Councillor Bowen, could Garstang Pool, or any of the other pools for that matter, actually serve all swimming clubs, all primary schools, and the public as well?
Garstang Pool already is serving all the schools in that area, and the swimming clubs and the public as well. So yes, the answer's there. When you're talking about other places in the borough, no, probably not, because the nearest park is Moor Park for Fleetwood, and there's a private pool in Thornton, and there's a private pool in Poulton. You don't have to go to a council-owned swimming pool.
Okay, so it can't serve everyone, Garstang, that's fair enough. But according to the cabinet report, all residents will be able to access facilities within a reasonable distance. The travel distance assumption, it's that I just read out then. Even if some are a bit wary about COVID, Garstang would be fairly inundated if the assumption was true that it was within reasonable distance, which it clearly isn't. I mean, you stated that effectively that people are going to go to Moore Park and so on. Well, that's your expectation, your hope. So I think what you're now saying is that, not that this was in the cabinet report, I may add, it wasn't even mentioned about the potential use of Moore Park. So I would say if Garstang Pool continue to support only the Garstang area, and that you're expecting the west of the borough to use Moore Park and potentially any other private swimming pool. But that begs a couple of questions. Are you expecting the YMCA members to fork out more money to go to use Moore Park? And has any analysis been undertaken to see if Moore Park could even cope with all the individual members, all the schools and all the clubs in the west of the borough, and all the general public as well?
No, we haven't done any of that work. But the thing is, what you're saying is that Wyre Borough residents have to have a swimming pool that's owned by the council. Well, they don't, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of facilities out there. They're already going to private gyms and doing exercise at home. You know, this is why the leisure centres are losing so many members, because they can't keep up with the demand for the private gyms, because they've got no overheads. You know, they don't want to pay so much money. You know, as long as they can go swimming, they still have to pay for a council pool. So, you know, at least that offer is still out there.
Okay. I don't think you answered the question about how you're expecting YMCA members to fork out more money. So if they're already a member, do you expect to pay them, fork out more money to go to Moore Park?
No, I don't expect them to fork out more money, but you're looking at the worst scenario. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. We're just talking about until the end of this year, the budget year, March. We don't know what's going to happen after that. For us, you know, if we get the government funding and it's enough money, we can open more pools. You're just jumping the gun, actually.
Okay, so there's no analysis being done on Moore Park anyway about the ability to cope, and even whether Blackpool Council would appreciate the influx of all the schools, all the clubs, and all the individual members and general public as well. Well, I think the analysis and the strategy seems to be flawed there. But anyway, I believe all the schools and clubs have been contacted. Is it true that 30 schools that use Poulton and Fleetwood have been contacted, and that 27 of them were interested in returning on the 11th of January?
As far as I know, yes. I haven't actually got the figures, but I think most of them said that they were willing to return, but I don't think they were all willing to return in January. A lot of them was talking about returning after the half term, end of February.
Okay.
If possible, but we don't know that even, do we? We don't know what position we're going to be in with the pandemic in January or February or March. We're just presuming.
Yeah, there are lots of uncertainties, I appreciate. Could I just ask, where in the report, though, is the information on the willingness and the ability of schools and clubs to return to swimming? Would it not have been preferential to have that data inside a report to create an informed decision?
Well, we did ask the schools before that cabinet decision, and that we were told by them, most of them, because everything was up in the air at that particular time, that they weren't at that particular time thinking about sending children swimming. They had more important things on the mind, and when everything was settled down and safe to do so, then they would look at coming back to swimming.
But it wasn't. Whatever that discussions took place, we decided not to put it in the cabinet report, did we?
Well, what we did put in the cabinet report was that there would be swimming facilities for everybody in Wyre, whether it be council, private, or Blackpool Council. And I remember specifically the paragraph about that being in that report.
I'm just thinking that it would have been helpful for information to be placed in the report, especially given some of the misinformation that was presented by cabinet members on the evening of the cabinet report. I think you were saying basically that schools had been contacted, but you were being contradicted by your fellow members of the cabinet. So given that we're not even
I don't think I was being contradicted. We did consult with the schools. Nobody's saying we didn't. I don't know where you've got that from.